While she was working, an art professor named Linda Sheely visited.
When I walked among Palenque's buildings, I saw a culture where the art was central. And I really was driven to understand who had done it and why and how.
Sheely began to help Robertson. As they worked, she gained an intimate knowledge of the site. It would be put to use in 1973, when Robertson hosted a conference at Palenque. There, Sheely met Peter Matthews, who had spent the past winter analyzing books of Palenque's glyphs.
Basically, by the end of that process, I had 3 huge notebooks filled up with transcriptions in Thompson's wretched T numbers of all the signs of every single inscription from Palenque.
Matthews teamed up with Sheely to reconstruct Palenque's dynastic history. They knew that some royal names at Palenque are accompanied by a title, a winged sun sign.
And so what we did is we went through and found every example of this title and wrote down the nearest date.
Poring over Palenque's inscriptions, they found over 40 names with the royal title. Each was accompanied by a date and glyph describing the event on that date. For example, a birth shown by the upended head of an iguana. As Sheely and Matthews arranged the births, deaths, and ceremonies by date, the patterns emerged. One ruler stood out, whom they dubbed Lord Shield. He was born on the 23rd of March, 603. His name glyph featured a warrior's shield. It led them to Palenque's most dominant building, the Temple of the Inscriptions. The meaning of its hieroglyphic tablets had been an enigma for centuries. Sheely and Matthews now saw that the panels were filled with references to Lord Shield and key events of his life. Suddenly, a discovery made in 1948 took on new meaning. A hidden staircase was found in the temple's inner chamber, leading to a crypt with a limestone sarcophagus. Inside was a human skeleton, masked in jade. Sheely and Matthews realized that this must be the body of Lord Shield. For the first time, hieroglyphs were connected to the remains of a Maya. The glyphs Sheely and Matthews grasped traced the life stories of Lord Shield and 5 of his successors.
And they came out and literally announced that they had sort of cracked the dynasty of Palenque. And they had names of the rulers and the times when they ruled.
We had them with funny names like Sunshield and a Lord Toothache.
At that point, Moises Morales, a local guide, jumped up and said, "Why is it that when important discoveries like this are made, the name is given in English, Lord Shield, or Escudo in Spanish?" He said, "These people spoke Maya."
So they called the king Pakal, a Mayan word later confirmed phonetically to mean shield.
It was just a giddy sort of feeling, and I'll never forget it. It was a real turning point in Maya studies.
After years of work, the cracking of the Maya code was within reach. But one big hurdle remained: to read the hieroglyphs aloud in the language in which they were written. The phonetic decipherment begun by Konorisov had to be completed. Despite decades of effort, fewer than 30 syllabic signs could be read with confidence. The key to the sounds of the glyphs would be found by David Stewart, whose education as a Mayanist began at an early age. his father, George, often brought him along on field trips to Mesoamerica. One of David's most memorable expeditions was to Coba in the Yucatan.
Incredible place to wander around as a kid. What really got me, though, was while we were at Coba, there were a couple of monuments that were actually discovered. My dad would drop everything and work on drawing the monument. And I would just sort of look over his shoulder while he was doing that and thought, gee, you know, this is pretty amazing.
He decided he would go out and draw some himself. So he'd take his crayons and paper and everything and go out and started drawing hieroglyphs.
By the time we got back to the States, my inner soul had been so affected by that experience that I just wanted to keep going back.
Two years later, George took David to meet Linda Sheely.
I remember kind of sitting there quietly in the office while she was drawing a glyph, and I don't know why I blurted this out, but I said, "Oh, that's a fire glyph." And Linda kind of paused, and I remember she sort of looked behind her shoulder over at me and said, "Yeah, right, kid, that's a fire glyph."
George said that they would really appreciate it if there was ever a chance that David could study with me or something. And so on the spur of the moment, I said, why didn't he come down to Palenque this summer?
And the next summer was one of the most amazing times of my life. She allowed me to help her check her drawings. You know, we were in the temples with flashlights, with her drawings on clipboards, making corrections. Now, I remember Linda was saying, "Okay, kid, you know, if you want to learn Maya-glyphs, you gotta do it on your own."
I gave him the tablet of the cross, told him to go out on the back porch and figure out as much as he could about it. He came back a couple of days later and had the same amount of structural understanding of the text that it had taken me 3 years to do. And so I figured then that he was really quite good.
At age 12, David presented his first scholarly paper on Maya hieroglyphs.
And he gives a paper that was certainly beyond the abilities of about 2/3 or 3/4 of the audience to follow. It was a scholarly paper, and mostly people were just amazed.
Then, after his high school graduation, Stewart received an unexpected call. He had won a MacArthur Fellowship, popularly known as the Genius Award. At age 18, he was the youngest recipient ever of the prestigious prize. Stewart delayed college to work on the glyphs full-time. It was then that he made his great discovery. It came when he focused on a pair of signs already believed to have been deciphered. Eric Thompson had pointed out that one of these signs signaled a count forward to a new date. The other, a count backward to a prior date. The two glyphs shared a common sign, what Thompson called either a water sign or the head of a shark, or shok in Maya. Shok can also mean to count. But Stewart discovered that several other signs also substituted for the shark. A human head, a monkey, and in one instance, a bracket-shaped sign. Did all these signs stand for the word count? Stewart felt there was a simpler explanation. The bracket symbol was also the phonetic sign for the syllable oo. Suddenly, he realized that all these signs stood for the syllable oo. The proof? Each sign freely substituted for the oo bracket in contexts that had nothing to do with counting.
What Dave Stewart did was show us that many of these substitutions are purely phonetic substitutions that are spelling exactly the same word in slightly different ways.
The backward and forward counting glyphs were phonetically spelled phrases. E-U-T and U-T-Ya. In Maya, Iut means, and then it happened.